The First Time Homebuyers Podcast. My name is Tom Sommers with Coldwell Banker Burnett, and my co-host, as always, Eric McKenna with Remax. How are you today, Eric?
Doing great. Great to be here.
All right. So, for those of you who have been following us or new people tuning in, we are continuing with a series here as we get our podcast rolling regarding being a homebuyer and the steps to purchasing a home. We're going to talk about presenting an offer. So, there's a lot of different things we could talk about, but I thought rather than go over forms, Eric, how do you feel if we talk about just some of the basic forms, but more strategy?
Absolutely. That's the key to it anyways.
Okay, so hopefully by this point, if you've started to look for a home, or if you haven't looked for a home at all, the first form you're going to see from your agent should be an agency form. They take different names depending on the state, but essentially it just explains to you how we as professionals would represent you should you choose one of us as an agent to represent you.
Correct.
So let's go on the premise that you have seen that already. But again, that's another way when you're looking for a real estate agent. If they don't hand you that form the first time they physically meet you, you want to ask the question.
Absolutely.
So when you're talking about presenting an offer, you also will go through some affiliated business documents where the brokers have to disclose if they have affiliated business arrangements with, title companies, mortgage, closing, all that type of thing. And then the buyer rep contract. This is also really important because it's the only way that Eric and I get paid. We get paid by the seller. We work for you, the buyer, for free. So we're willing to go to the mat for you and do everything we can, but we're hoping that you will also have enough confidence and respect in us that you would sign that broker contract, which is an exclusive contract only to work with us. That's the only way we get paid. So getting all of that out of the way, let's talk about presenting an offer. So right now, Eric, in the Pittsburgh area, I know your market is really hot like ours is in Minneapolis. What are you doing when you're talking about presenting an offer on a home to your buyers to give them maybe a leg up?
The very first thing I do is I recognize the type of market that we're in. And right now, as we've talked in prior weeks, Tommy, it is a seller's market.
Yep.
So that obviously produces challenges for buyers and agents, good agents. What I like to do is make sure that I explain very carefully to my buyer that we are in a challenging market right now. We may be in a circumstance where there's multiple offers. It might be a highest and best circumstance. So I prepare them clearly about what the market is like, and I provide them comps, comparables of other properties like the property that we're going to put our offer in. I also like to remind them too that elements of how your offer is going to be viewed is not always the asking price. It could be a component of hand money. It could be the strength of the type of loan that we're going to be offering as for financing. All those components are looked upon a certain way by a potential seller. So my standpoint for my clients is typically always go in with the strongest offer that we can, barring any unforeseen circumstances. And again, it's real estate, that happens.
Yep.
But in a general offer circumstance, I always like to go with the premise, put your best foot forward.
Right.
Knowing that you may receive a counteroffer or we may be in a multiple offer situation. But, it doesn't pay to be a cheapskate in life. And that goes for real estate as well. It pays to be savvy and smart, but if you really are in love with the home and it's the right home for you, you want to put your best foot forward. And that's what I express to my buyers.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with that. And to Eric's point, when you're talking about putting your best foot forward, it isn't always price because it always depends. So like, let's say you find a house that you really like, but there are no other offers. Well, that gives you a lot more leverage to do different things with pricing and all of that. But when you get into a multiple offer, that's a whole nother animal and you have to look at it a different way. So some of that for a seller, it's not always money. Of course, people want to sell it for as much as they can, but there are some people who are being, transferred, divorced, whatever the case might be, and the time frame is more important to them than the money. And so you just really never know exactly what someone's motivation is.
Right.
We're getting caught in a lot of multiple offers in the Minneapolis area right now, and I've written several different offers for people, and some we get, some we don't. No matter what happens, if there's someone who's willing to pay more for a property and overpay for a property, then I say let them do that, and we'll find you something different because it always works out. But when you're in a multiple offer situation, you shouldn't be scared because you don't really necessarily know what those other offers are going to be.
That's right.
So let me say, in my experience of 15 years, that let's say there's three offers on a property, and it's a $200,000 home, which still definitely qualifies for FHA.
Hmm.
Because 75% or so, I think, of the first-time home buyers use the FHA because it's less money down, you can know right there that chances are if there's three offers on a property, two of the three will probably be FHA. So if you're FHA, now you have a platform to go, okay, I think we're better than two of the three. So the third one is
Right.
really the one that's not for sure, because that could be a conventional.
That's
And,
fine. Sure.
in that situation, they may have a little bit more money down. So for this scenario, let's just pretend that all three offers, yours and the other ones, are all FHA.
Hmm.
So then how do you make yourself different? Because it'll only appraise for what it'll appraise for. So if they have it listed at 200,000 and your agent can explain to you and show you proof this house is worth $210,000, then you should really look hard at paying a price like that, because sometimes people will underprice something to get interest.
Absolutely.
But having said that, I think the other piece of this is what's different about our offer. So to
Right.
Eric's point, more earnest money, money in hand, closing date,
Hmm.
all types of different creative things that you can do to set yourself apart. What else sticks out in your mind, Eric?
On a few occasions, and this is a little bit of out of the box thinking, but I've had certain circumstances where, as a buyer's agent, I got to have some great conversations with the listing agent, and I got a little bit of history about the seller and
Good
why they
point.
were moving and their family and so forth. All this is valuable information. I think what Tommy and I do as an active buyer's agent, we're involved. We'll try to get as much information from the listing agent and the seller as we possibly can. In certain circumstances, I found connectivity between my buyer and and the seller in common interest. And I have had my buyers write very sincere letters to the seller,
Yeah.
um, not pleading, but explaining indeed why they love the property, what their plans are for it, whether it's raising a family, and why it's a unique buy to them, and why they really want it. Yes, it's a strategy, but in many oftentimes you cannot take the human element out of a transaction. And
Yep.
sometimes it's not all money. Sometimes really you can tug on the heartstrings, and I think that is part of being a wonderful agent and doing due diligence for your client, is recognizing those opportunities as well as the standard negotiations.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that with that, you're not pleading, you're just basically saying, hey, this is why we would be a great fit. So put yourself in the shoes of the seller. If you had two offers or three and they're all essentially equal, and one of them has an agent that has just been a nightmare to work with, and then the other one you don't know much about, but the third one's like took time to write a nice letter and explain what it is that they love about your home. Well, if all things are considered equal, why not work with the person who seems most genuine to appreciate getting the house?
Absolutely.
The other thing too I want to talk about real quickly is closing costs, because closing costs are not a right. All right. So 20 years ago, you had to have 20% down, pay all your own closing costs to purchase a home. So that amount of closing costs, seller paid closing costs, comes out of the bottom line of the seller unless you
Right.
write the offer for more than what the list price is.
Hmm.
So this is no longer a gimme. And if you only have 3.5% down, for instance, and you're struggling, you could easily make the house payments, but you just don't have the cash. Well, another strategy is, instead of asking the seller to pay closing costs, why don't you go to your lender and say, hey, if you bump up my loan by a quarter point, will you cover my closing costs? So that you can go in as a non-contingent buyer with 3.5% down, putting
Right.
down a $2,000 earnest money, and paying your own closing costs through your mortgage. That could be the one thing right there that could do it and get you that house over your competitors.
Without question. And that goes back to when Tommy and I have spoken in prior weeks about being with a local, wonderful mortgage agent
Yep.
that you can sit down and look in the eye and say, hey, here's my scenario. And if it is a good mortgage agent, they're probably going to be already thinking in that vein for you,
Yes.
between the conversations with your realtor and yourself. So again, it goes back to, finding the right team. Okay.
Mhm.
But that is a great option. I will tell you this. There are a lot of properties that are actually underlisted, meaning that they're put on the market sometimes for less than they're worth. And if we're confident based on comps and so forth that the property may appraise higher than it's listed for or the listing price, maybe to be competitive, you still ask for your seller assist because you need it, but you realize the house is worth it and you go above asking price.
Yeah.
And that sometimes is a strategy. It's a little bit of a risk. We can mitigate that risk for you, but that's often an offer. If a house is worth 230 and you can see it in comps and it's listed at 200 and you're in a multiple circumstance and we kind of feel everybody's around 200, it's worth it to you to go to 210 or 215. In the long run, you get the house, it's still undervalued, and everybody wins.
Well, yeah, especially when you're talking about interest rates, because I would rather take a house for $215,000 at 4% interest, just using a number, versus $200,000 at 5% interest. Take that, do your quick math on that on one of the mortgage calculators, and you'll see that the amount of money is negligible, especially if it's a house that you feel like, gosh, this is the right place for me. Now, all of these are just hypothetical ideas that we've done that have worked in different situations. They don't work in every. So again, going back to hiring the team and getting the right person, you need a real estate agent who is willing to negotiate on your behalf, but also strategize with you to help you put the best offer together. So don't make the assumption that if a house is priced lower that there's something wrong with it. It's very possible that the seller has a different motivation like we spoke of, or what if it's a new agent who doesn't know what they're doing and they totally misprice it? And I'll give you a perfect example. I sat down once under a multiple situation where I was trying to get a listing. I was the fourth or fifth real estate agent in, and all of the ones before me were $25,000 to $30,000 below what my suggested price was. Now, from a real estate perspective, that was very unnerving because I'm thinking, okay, well, what did I do wrong? Well, as we sat there and talked, I realized from them sharing with me, none of the four agents before me ever showed them any comps.
Right.
And I'm like, well, wait a minute. How do you go to a listing appointment and not show people comparables to talk about your price and give them an option of where they want to start? So I ended up getting the listing, and we sold it in a relatively short period of time, and I got them $30,000 more than the other agents would have listed it for, and the buyer was thrilled, and it was a good deal for everybody. So don't automatically make the assumption that there's something wrong, because lots of times there isn't.
No, and there are undervalued properties under there. And my personal experience has been, it's like Tommy had mentioned, it's one of two things. One, there's a certain circumstance the seller is going through and they're looking for a quick sale.
Yep.
Could be an estate, could be a relocation. The other thing is just the inexperience of some agents, listing agents. They just don't put the house up at the detriment of their own seller at the market value. So there are opportunities to do well out there as a buyer, okay? But it comes down to having the right agent and having an agent that likes to be a buyer's agent. Some agents are specialized in listings. I love to list homes, but I also love to be a buyer's agent. I work equally on my craft, and I know Tommy does as well. I've learned a lot from Tommy. We have two different but equal parts of what it is to be a realtor, buying and selling. And I take my buyer strategies very seriously. When you work with a buyer client, there's so many factors that they're counting on you, okay, to help them make the right decision. And negotiations is a very big part of that. You need an experienced and very accomplished realtor. This is one of the biggest, as we've said before, one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make financially or lifestyle-wise. Don't risk it. Do not risk it. Get the right advocate for you.
Yeah, because if all things are considered equal, why wouldn't you want the best people fighting on your behalf? Because everyone has a different skill set. Some are better than others. So again, that goes back to an earlier episode. If you want to revisit it, it's called Choosing a Realtor and a Mortgage Agent. So it's there for you online on Spreaker as well as YouTube. So next week we're going to be talking about inspections and how to choose an inspector and what that all entails. So look for us next week. If you have questions or comments, please feel free to email us or call us. All of our information, obviously, if you're watching the video, is below us. It is also on our websites. Again, I'm Tom Sommers with Coldwell Banker Burnett out of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and Eric McKenna in the Pittsburgh area with RE/MAX. So until next week, thanks so much, guys, and have a wonderful week. Bye.
Take care.